It's a good bounce back win for us today. I thought we started the game with the right tone on the defensive end. And so that was that was by design for us to get back to our normal.
They told us it was about experience. They told us it was about defensive liabilities. They told us that the Olympic stage was no place for a rookie, no matter how famous she was. But as we look toward the 2025 roster, the tune has changed completely. The defiant stance of the coaching staff, which once seemed unshakable, is beginning to crack under the weight of reality. We are witnessing one of the biggest backtracks in modern sports history. Head coach Cheryl Reeve and the USA Selection Committee made a gamble in the summer of 2024. They bet that the brand of Team USA was strong enough to survive without the Caitlin Clark phenomenon. They bet that winning a gold medal would silence the critics. They were wrong. While they won the gold, they lost the narrative. And now reports and shifts in tone suggest that the hierarchy is finally admitting what the rest of the world knew months ago. Leaving Caitlin Clark at home was a massive mistake. This isn't just about a roster spot anymore. It's about the survival of the sport's popularity. The arrogance of the old guard has collided headfirst with the financial and cultural force that is Caitlin Clark. Today we are going deep into the admission, the fallout, and the frantic attempt to fix the damage before the 2025 cycle kicks into high gear. The coach has reportedly changed her mind. But you have to wonder if it is too little, too late. To understand the magnitude of this reversal, we have to go back to the moment that broke the internet. When the roster for Paris dropped, the omission of Caitlin Clark wasn't just a sports story. It was a cultural flashpoint. The committee led by the philosophy of Coach Reeve hid behind the vague metric of experience. They argued that the international game is more physical, more tactical, and that a 22-year-old, regardless of her college accolades, was ready to displace a 10-year veteran. But let's be honest about what really happened. This was never just about basketball skills. If you look at the history of Team USA, even on the men's side, they have frequently brought in the young, exciting phenom to learn from the greats. They brought Christian Leitner on the Dream Team. They brought Anthony Davis before he was an NBA dominator. The experience argument falls apart when you realize that the Olympics are also a marketing vehicle for the future of the sport. By leaving Clark off, they weren't just prioritizing veterans. They were actively choosing to dim the spotlight. Insiders have long speculated that this was a chemistry decision. And in the world of professional sports, chemistry is often a polite code word for ego management. The locker room for Team USA is filled with legends. Players like Diana Taurasi and Breanna Stewart. There was a genuine fear within the coaching staff that bringing in Clark, who commands an army of cameras and reporters wherever she goes, would disrupt the ecosystem. They didn't want the veterans to feel like background characters in the Caitlin Clark show. So, to protect the feelings of the establishment, they sacrificed the engagement of the fans. It was a decision rooted in the past, ignoring the reality of the present. They treated Clark like just another rookie, failing to recognize that she is an economic engine unlike anything women's basketball has ever seen. They thought the noise would die down once the game started. They assumed the fans would move on, but that was the first massive miscalculation in a series of errors that has led us to this awkward 2025 pivot. Leading up to the Olympics and the WNBA season, the narrative from the establishment was clear. Caitlin Clark was going to struggle. The most infamous example of this was Diana Taurasi's "reality is coming" comment. It was a warning shot. It was the old guard telling the new kid, "You might have scored on college girls, but you can't score on us." This sentiment seemed to permeate the decision-making process for Team USA. If the coaches believed Clark was going to get crushed by pros, it made sense to leave her off the team. You don't bring a liability to Paris. But then the season actually happened. And this is where the coach's mistake became undeniable. Clark didn't just survive, she thrived. Was it rocky at first? Sure. She turned the ball over. She got physically battered by defenders who seemed to take extra pleasure in welcoming her to the league. But she adapted at a speed that terrified the rest of the league. By the time the Olympic break hit, Clark was already looking like one of the best point guards in the world. By the end of the season, she was breaking assist records that had stood for decades. She was dropping triple-doubles. She was shooting from logos. The reality that Teresi promised did arrive. But it was a reality check for the veterans, not for Clark. This performance on the court dismantled the entire justification for the snub. The committee could no longer say she isn't ready. The film proved she was better than half the roster they sent to Paris. Every time Clark had a 20-point 10-assist night, it was a direct indictment of Coach Reeves' judgment. The fans saw it, the media saw it, and eventually the sponsor saw it. The basketball reasons excuse had evaporated, leaving only the ugly truth. They just didn't want her there. We have to talk about head coach Cheryl Reeve. She is a legend in the game, a brilliant tactician and a winner. But she is also known for being prickly, defensive, and fiercely protective of the way things used to be. Throughout the season, the tension between Reeve and the Clark mania phenomenon was palpable. There were moments in press conferences where reporters would ask Reeve about the massive crowds clearly there to see Clark, and Reeve would pivot. She would talk about the growth of the league as a whole or credit the local fans, refusing to acknowledge the specific impact of the Indiana rookie. It felt like a silent protest. It felt like she was annoyed that a player she didn't view as the GOAT was getting GOAT-level treatment. This personal bias seemed to bleed into the USA selection. Reeve values defense and grit. Clark is an offensive SOT who plays with a high-risk, high-reward style. On paper, it's a style clash, but a great coach adapts their system to fit the best talent available. A great coach finds a way to use a weapon like Clark. Reeve chose not to. She chose to stick to her guns, effectively saying, "My system is more important than your talent." But recent reports suggest a thawing of this ice.
Why?
Because you can only deny greatness for so long before you look foolish. As the 2025 roster discussions begin, Reeve has had to face the music. Her team won gold, yes, but the ratings for the Olympic Games were a fraction of what they could have been. Meanwhile, WNBA games featuring Clark were outdrawing NBA playoff games. The coach is realizing that by excluding Clark, she didn't humble the rookie. She alienated the audience. The agenda has to change because the business of basketball demands it. Let's follow the money because in professional sports, money is the only thing that speaks louder than winning. Team USA is funded by sponsors, primarily Nike. Nike also happens to have signed Caitlin Clark to a massive signature shoe deal. Do you think the executives at Nike were happy that their huge investment was sitting on the couch during the Olympics? Absolutely not. There were whispers of furious phone calls behind the scenes. Nike wants to sell jerseys. They want to sell shoes. They want viral moments. A Team USA without Clark is a prestige product, but it's not a viral product. A Team USA with Clark is a global phenomenon. The difference in merchandise sales alone is likely in the millions. Then you have the TV partners. NBC and the networks broadcasting these games want eyeballs. The difference between a game featuring Breanna Stewart and a Ja Wilson, as great as they are, versus a game featuring Caitlin Clark is the difference between a niche sport and a mainstream spectacle. The viewership numbers from the WNBA season proved this. Indiana Fever games were consistently breaking records, pulling in millions of viewers. Team USA games, they did fine, but they didn't break the internet. This financial pressure is the primary driver behind the sudden change of heart regarding the 2025 roster. USA Basketball is a business. They rely on hype to sell tickets for exhibition tours and future tournaments. They're looking at the spreadsheets and realizing they threw away a winning lottery ticket in 2024. They cannot afford to do it again in 2025. The mistake wasn't just tactical. It was fiscal. And when the money bleeds, the coach is forced to change her mind. The 2025-5 roster isn't just about adding Clark. It's about subtracting the obstacles that kept her out. The 2024 team was built around Diana Taurasi's last dance. It was a legacy roster, but that legacy has been secured. Taurasi has her 6th gold medal. There is no justification for her to be on the 2025-5 team. The gatekeeper is leaving the gate open. This natural attrition solves a massive headache for Coach Reeve in 2024. Cutting a legend to make room for a rookie would have caused a locker room revolt. In 2025, the legends are retiring. This gives the coaching staff a convenient excuse to pivot toward the future. They can frame Clark's inclusion not as an admission of guilt, but as a natural progression. But we know the truth. We know that if Clark hadn't performed the way she did, they might have tried to keep the veterans around longer. Clark forced their hand. She accelerated the retirement timeline of the old guard by making them look slow. The speed at which the Fever played, the range from which Clark shot, it made the traditional Team USA half-court offense look antiquated. The rumors swirling now indicate that the 2025 roster will be built around Clark and Aho Wilson. This is a massive shift. It's an admission that the torch must be passed even if the veterans aren't ready to let go. The clique that reportedly froze Clark out is dissolving. The Mean Girls era of Team USA is ending simply because they can't keep up with the pace of the new era. So, what does this admission look like? It's rarely a press release saying, "I was wrong." In the world of high-level coaching, admissions come in the form of tonal shifts and roster invites. Recently, we've heard phrases like evolving roster, looking at the next generation, and specific praise for Clark's resilience from the USA basketball hierarchy. Coach Reeve has been quoted discussing the fluidity of the player pool for the upcoming World Cup cycles. The defensiveness is gone. The stern "we picked the best 12" line has been replaced with "we are excited to see who steps up for the next cycle." This is code. This is the white flag. They know they cannot go into 2025 without her. The fan backlash from the Olympic snub was vitriolic. Fans were actively rooting against Team USA in some corners of the internet. Something unprecedented. USA basketball cannot exist in a world where the American public hates the team because they feel the best player was screwed over. The plan for 2025 is clearly to bring Clark into the fold, likely as a starter, and pretend the snub never happened. They will try to gaslight us into thinking this was the plan all along. Let her get a year of pro experience, then bring her in. But we have to remember the disrespect. We have to remember that they didn't want her until they needed her. It's crucial to understand the psychology of what is happening right now behind closed doors. The power dynamic in women's basketball has shifted more in the last 18 months than it did in the previous 18 years. For decades, the power resided with the selection committee, the veteran coaches, and the UConn alumni network that seemed to run the national team like a private club. If you wanted a gold medal, you kissed the ring. You waited your turn. You played the right way. Caitlin Clark didn't just break the records. She broke that system. By becoming bigger than the team itself, she proved that the old gatekeepers no longer held the keys to the kingdom. This realization is what is driving the current chaos within USA basketball. They are scrambling to regain control of a narrative that has spun wildly out of their hands. They thought they could dictate the terms of Clark's stardom. Instead, Clark's stardom is dictating the terms of their survival. And let's not overlook the targeting narrative that plagued the 2024 season, which USA basketball remained suspiciously silent on. Throughout her rookie year, Clark was subjected to hard fouls, face guarding, and physical play that bordered on assault in some games. The infamous hip check by Kennedy Carter was just the tip of the iceberg. At the time, the old guard and the coaching establishment largely dismissed it as welcome to the league toughness. There was no public defense of Clark from the national team leadership. In fact, some of the very players who were selected for the Olympic team were the ones delivering the hardest hits. This created a rift between the fan base and the institution. Fans saw a conspiracy. The establishment wasn't just snubbing her. They were trying to break her. Now, as Coach Reeve tries to pivot for 2025, she has to bridge that massive gap of trust. How do you invite a player to join a family that let her get beat up for months without saying a word? How do you convince Clark that she is a valued member of the core when just a year ago she was deemed unworthy? This is why the rumors of a mistake admission are so significant. It's not just about basketball strategy. It's a necessary diplomatic apology. If they don't admit they were wrong, Clark has every right to say no thanks. And a rejection from Clark would be a PR catastrophe that USA basketball cannot afford. Imagine the headlines if the biggest star in the world publicly declines the invitation because she doesn't trust the coach. It would be the final nail in the coffin for the old regime's credibility. The changing of the mind is also likely driven by the sheer statistical anomaly that Clark became by the end of 2024. We aren't just talking about good numbers. We are talking about video game numbers. She led the league in assists. She shattered the rookies' scoring record. She generated more points per game, scoring plus assists, than anyone else in the league. The defensive liability argument that Reeve leaned on so heavily began to look ridiculous when Clark was leading the league in steals and rebounding well for her position. When you look at the advanced analytics, Clark was arguably a top 5 player in the entire world by October 2024. Leaving a top 5 player off the national team isn't a coaching decision. It's malpractice. Reeve knows this. She sees the data, and as a coach who prides herself on preparation, she knows she can't justify it anymore. Furthermore, the Caitlin effect has exposed the frailty of the WNBA's traditional marketing model, which USA Basketball relies on. For years, the league marketed the game and the cause. Clark proved that fans care about stars. They care about storylines. They care about rivalries. The 2024 Olympic run was devoid of all that. It was clinical, efficient, and boring. It was a participation trophy for the veterans. Moving into the 2025 FIA America Cup and the subsequent World Cup cycle, the organizers know they need drama. They